Undercover boss stood in line, unnoticed. He watched the cashier slam a pizza box on the counter and sneer. "Yeah, it's still Marcelli's, but don't expect anything special. The old guy's gone. Probably dead by now." Customers laughed. Another added, "His sauce died before he did." The man's fingers trembled. He looked up, eyes misted, and whispered, "That was my father's name, and mine." But no one listened. No one recognized him. He sat quietly, biting into a cold slice of pizza that carried his family's name, and none of its soul. What he didn't know yet was this went far deeper than bad sauce. Someone was slowly killing his entire brand from the inside out. And this wasn't just business, it was war. Antonio Marcelli, 58, wasn't just any pizzeria owner. He was the last flame of a legacy that had burned for generations. His father, Giuseppe Marcelli, stepped off a boat from Naples in 1965 with nothing but a battered rolling pin, a tomato-stained notebook filled with his mother's handwritten recipes, and a fire in his heart to make a better life. One pizza at a time. He didn't speak much English back then, but he understood flavor, family, and honor. His philosophy was simple. Make every pizza like you're feeding your own children. Antonio grew up behind the counter, his small hands kneading dough beside his father's. He'd watch Giuseppe press every pizza with care, kiss 2 fingers, and lift them to the sky, a silent nod to his ancestors. At 12, Antonio burned his first crust. At 17, he perfected his own twist on the sauce. When Giuseppe passed in 2004, Antonio didn't just inherit a business. He inherited a promise. Keep it real, keep it honest, and never let anyone touch the sauce without respect. For decades, Antonio honored that vow like a sacred oath. Marcelli's Pizza became more than a restaurant. It was a community institution. People came not just for the food, but for the warmth, the laughter, the soul. But lately, something had changed. Sales slipped. Customers didn't linger like they used to. Familiar faces stopped coming in. Online reviews went from glowing to gut-wrenching. Tastes like someone else bought the place. Not the Marcelli I remember. Feels corporate, cold. Each word hit Antonio like a punch to the chest. He'd read those reviews in the dead of night, sitting in the dark kitchen with a cooling slice in his hand. He'd walk through the dining room in the mornings, brushing invisible crumbs off empty tables, wondering if his father would still recognize this place. He hadn't changed the recipes. He hadn't sold out. Or so he thought. But as the complaints grew louder and the loyal customers dwindled, a seed of doubt began to fester inside him. Was he losing touch? Had the world simply moved on from old-school pizza made with heart? Or worse, was someone quietly poisoning the soul of his family's legacy from the inside? The answers would come soon, but not in the way he ever expected. For weeks, Antonio Marcelli couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling night after night, replaying old memories like a film reel. His father dusting flour across the marble counter, his mother singing Neapolitan lullabies in the back kitchen, the clink of plates, the warmth of satisfied smiles. But those memories had begun to feel like a lie. Had he failed them? Afraid his team was hiding the truth, Antonio made the hardest decision of his life. He disappeared. Publicly, he claimed he was taking a sabbatical to focus on health and family. In reality, he shaved his beard, donned a second-hand hoodie, slipped on fake glasses, and pulled a ball cap so low it shadowed his eyes. He even changed his name to Tony Bellini, a name only his mother had ever called him as a boy. He took the late-night dishwasher shift at the Marcelli's location on 7th and Bayview, the very first shop his father had opened. No one recognized him. But the moment he walked in, he felt it. The smell was wrong. Too much vinegar in the sauce. The dough was stiff, cold, lifeless, like it had been trucked in from a warehouse. And the tomatoes? He picked one up, sniffed it. No aroma, no soul. In the back kitchen, the laughter was forced, the camaraderie hollow. "You knew?" barked the manager, a slick guy in his 30s with gelled hair, flashy chains, and a fake smile. "Yeah," Antonio replied in a low voice. "Name's Tony. Just need some work." "Keep your head down, Tony. We're a tight ship here. Don't rock the boat." But Antonio kept his eyes open. and what he saw gutted him. Unlabeled tomato crates, bags of frozen dough tossed like trash, a mystery sauce arriving in plastic jugs. Not the handwritten recipe that had been passed down for 3 generations. Still, Antonio tried to reason with himself. Maybe the manager was cutting corners. Maybe they were short on real supplies. Maybe it was desperation, not betrayal. But then, one rainy Thursday night, the illusion shattered. It was past midnight. Antonio had just finished mopping the kitchen floor when he heard voices in the storage room. The door was cracked open. Inside, Vince, the same flashy manager, was hunched over a desk, speaking on speakerphone. Antonio leaned in, careful not to breathe. "Yeah, Gusto's already got 2 Marcelli shops flipped," Vince said, chuckling. "No one suspects a thing." A rough voice replied on the other end. "We push another month of that factory crap. Customers will be gone for good." Vince laughed louder. "By Christmas, the Marcelli name will be worthless. That's when we buy it for pennies, rebrand under Gusto, and bury the old man's legacy." Antonio's chest tightened. He pressed a hand against the wall to steady himself. His knuckles were white. They weren't just cutting corners. They were bleeding his family's name dry from the inside. Giuseppe's dream, his father's entire life, was being auctioned off like scrap metal. The voice on the phone, Marco, continued. "And tell your guy to keep swapping the sauce. It's killing the repeat customers." "Done," Vince said. "Only problem, that kid Luca keeps poking around. Might have to let him go." Antonio froze. Luca, the quiet dishwasher, barely 20th, always nervous, always working late. He was the one who helped Antonio clean his first night. The one who whispered, "Don't trust Vince. Just keep your head down." Antonio remembered Luca's hands trembling as he carried sauce containers to the back fridge. He remembered the time he stopped mid-shift and said, "This place used to mean something, didn't it?" Antonio felt fire rise in his throat. This wasn't just theft. This was betrayal, a full-blown mutiny. And if Vince had his way, Luca, the only honest one left, was next. Antonio knew he had to act, but he couldn't blow his cover yet. First, he needed proof. Then, he needed to save Luca. And finally, he would do what the Marcelli men had always done when threatened. Fight, with heart, with fire, and with truth. If this twist caught you off guard, hit that subscribe button, because what Antonio does next will shock you even more. The rain had just started when Antonio stepped out the back door of the pizzeria. Luca was already there, sitting on a milk crate, hoodie pulled up, hands trembling as he smoked a cigarette down to the filter. Antonio approached slowly, the weight of what he'd just heard pressing into his chest. "Do you know what's happening in there?" he asked, voice low, controlled. Luca's eyes widened. He jumped to his feet, dropping the cigarette. I can't talk. If Vince finds out, they'll fire you?" Antonio cut in, gently placing a hand on the young man's shoulder. "I've been fired before, but this is bigger than a paycheck." Luca looked around as if the shadows could hear him. He leaned in. "I know who you are." Antonio blinked. "What?" Luca reached into his wallet and unfolded a faded photograph. "My dad kept this. Said it was the best day of his life." It was Antonio, 25 years old, standing beside his father Giuseppe in front of their old wood-fired oven, arms dusted in flour, faces lit with pride. The sign above them read, "Marcelli's, handmade with heart." "He brought me here when I was 5, Luca whispered. "We used to split one slice. He said it was sacred food. I remember the sauce like it was yesterday. Tangy, sweet, real. And then, one day, it was just gone." Antonio's throat tightened. He stared at the photo, trying not to fall apart. "They're destroying it," Luca said, "and I've been too scared to stop them." He sat down again, shoulders slumped. "Vince pays everyone extra to look the other way. Says it's just business. They bring in fake cheese, cheap dough, boxed sauce. Gusto Pizza Co. funds it all. They're trying to bleed you dry." Antonio clenched his fists. "But why? Why would anyone care this much about taking over an old pizzeria?" Luca hesitated. Then he pulled a folded packet from his backpack. Photocopies of documents he'd secretly made from Vince's office. "Because Gusto's trying to corner every block in the city. Your name's too strong, too beloved. So they bought Vince, offered him a cut of every shop he flips. But it gets worse. He handed over a page marked Confidential Acquisition Proposal. Antonio scanned it, forged authorization signatures, investor summaries, and then his name, with the word deceased next to it. They filed a fake death certificate in your name, Luca whispered. They were going to take the Marcelli trademark and claim you passed away. Your legacy was going to become a frozen food aisle brand. Antonio stood frozen in the rain, water dripping from his hat, his soul collapsing under the weight of it all. They hadn't just tried to replace him. They tried to erase him. They buried me alive, he muttered. Luca looked up. But I don't think they knew you'd come back. Antonio slowly raised his head. His eyes, and once tired, confused, were now full of fire. They thought I was done, he said, voice shaking with rage and resolve. But I'm still here, and I'm not letting them take what my father built. Luca stood beside him, chest rising. What do we do? Antonio turned to him, gripping the photo tightly. We fight smart. We get proof. We go public. And we remind the city what real pizza tastes like. They stood together in the rain, the forgotten founder and the dishwasher who never sold out, ready to reclaim a legacy. Antonio disappeared again. No texts, no shifts, not a single order run through the oven. Vince strutted around the store, smug as ever, telling everyone that Tony Bellini couldn't handle the heat. One less mouth to feed, he laughed. Good riddance. But in reality, Tony Bellini was gone. Antonio Marcelli was back, and he wasn't alone. In a cramped apartment above an old hardware store, Antonio and Luca were turning the tide. They didn't have much, just an old laptop, Luca's prepaid phone, and 20 years of anger and betrayal burning in Antonio's chest. But that was enough. We're not just saving pizza, Antonio told Luca. We're saving my father's name. They started with the sauce station. Antonio had noticed how Vince always ducked into the back before a shift started, swapping out the real batches. So they hid a micro camera in the spice rack, rigged to Luca's laptop. 3 nights later, boom. Vince on video, dumping bags of off-brand tomato paste into buckets and slapping the Marcelli label on top. That's one, Luca whispered. Then came the deliveries. Luca posed as a forgetful clerk and sweet-talked the Gusto delivery guy into printing replacements for missing receipts. Turns out Gusto had been sending product, cheese, sauce, even pre-cooked crusts, to Marcelli's under a different name. That's 2, Antonio said, jaw tight. Let's finish it. Finally, the burner phones. Luca snuck into the office, cleaned Vince's fingerprints off the desk, and copied every message. Dozens of texts. Keep sabotaging. Don't worry, the old man's dead. Luca's twitchy. If he talks, I'll handle it. We flipped 3 more. We own the city. Everything they needed. A betrayal this deep couldn't be stopped quietly. It had to be public, humiliating, permanent. So Antonio sent out a special invitation to every store manager, employee, investor, and Gusto's own regional rep under Vince's name. Big celebration tonight at flagship store. Pizza, champagne, transition of power. Vince becomes official franchise head. And they showed up. Vince was glowing in a new suit. Welcome, family, he shouted. Tonight we make history. He didn't know he was about to become it. Antonio waited in the back, eyes closed, holding his father's rolling pin. The same one Giuseppe brought from Naples in 1965. You ready? Luca asked. Antonio opened his eyes. Steel, fire, heart. Let's finish this. Before we show you how Antonio flips the entire operation on its head, now's the perfect time to subscribe. And while you're at it, check out some of our other Undercover CEO stories packed with shocking twists and real redemption. You can find them in the end of this video or in the description. Now back to story. The shop was packed. Staff huddled by the ovens, Gusto's rep laughed with investors, and Vince stood near the counter like a king ready to claim his crown. A toast was raised. To the future of Marcelli's. Then, the front door creaked open. Heads turned. In walked a man. Tall, calm, purposeful, Antonio Marcelli. Not in disguise, not hiding, but in a sharp black tailored suit, polished leather shoes, and wrapped around his waist. The original Marcelli family apron, its red embroidery faded by fire and time. Silence. A pizza cutter dropped. Someone gasped. And Vince? Vince choked on his champagne. "What the?" he stammered, eyes darting to the door. You're supposed to be gone?" Antonio asked, voice like marble. "Dead? Buried so you could wear my name like a costume?" He didn't wait for an answer. Antonio walked to the front counter, calmly pulled out a flat-screen monitor, and placed it on the counter like a judge delivering sentence. He clicked play. And then, chaos. Security camera footage of Vince pouring counterfeit sauce into prep buckets. Text messages with Gusto reps, laughing about buying the corpse of Marcelli for pennies. Hidden audio from the back room. "Luca's nosy. Might need to get rid of him. This brand's a relic. Once we rebrand, no one will even remember that old man." People turned. Staff looked sick. One girl cried. "You think pizza is just dough and cheese?" Antonio's voice shook now. "My father came here with nothing but a rolling pin and a notebook. He fed people through blackouts, layoffs, and family funerals. He taught me that food isn't business. It's honor. You didn't just try to steal my shop. You tried to erase my father." Then he turned to the Gusto rep. "And you, Ralph, you think a family name is just a trademark to erase?" Ralph raised a hand, chuckling nervously. "Look, Antonio, this is all a misunderstanding. These texts, they're out of context. We can make a deal. Gusto's got reach. We can take Marcelli's national. You've been working too long. Stop." Then bam! Antonio pointed to Vince. "You're done." He pulled a legal folder from his jacket and handed it to two officers who had quietly entered during the footage. One of them stepped forward. "Vince Renzoni, you're under arrest for conspiracy, corporate fraud, and trademark forgery." Vince shouted, tried to run, didn't get far. As the cuffs clicked, the Gusto rep tried to protest, but Antonio silenced him with a look. "You wanted to buy my ashes. Now you'll answer for the fire." The room was stunned. Humiliated faces, angry whispers. But Antonio wasn't finished. He turned to the rest of the staff, the cooks, the clerks, the ones who had watched and stayed quiet. "I don't need perfect chefs. I need loyalty. People who care about more than a paycheck. If you still believe in what this apron stands for, stay. If not, the door's already open." Silence. Then movement. Most walked out without a word, but 5 stayed, and the first was Luca. He walked forward, took the apron off his hook, and tied it on with shaking hands. "Let's fix this," he said softly. Antonio nodded. His eyes welled. Together. With Vince and Gusto out of the picture, Antonio wasted no time reclaiming the soul of Marcelli's. He promoted Luca, not just as kitchen lead, but as his partner. Together they scrubbed every inch of the shop clean, literally and figuratively. New ovens were brought in. Old sauce recipes were revived from Antonio's father's tomato-stained notebook. They even reupholstered the booths with his mother's original tablecloth patterns, stitched by hand from a trunk in the attic. Word spread like wildfire. Locals came back. Old customers cried when they tasted that first bite of real Marcelli's again. They called the comeback event "Back to the Flame." Lines wrapped around the block. Local news outlets picked up the story, but national media followed. Headlines read, "Owner declared dead comes back to save family pizzeria. David versus Goliath and the dough that fought back." Investors pulled out of Gusto Pizza. Their stock plummeted. Antonio never gloated. Instead, he smiled at Luca and said, "Let the sauce do the talking." And on the very first page of the new Marcelli's menu, in golden script, it read, "To Giuseppe, who taught me to cook with fire. And to Luca, who remembered the taste when others forgot." Today, Marcelli's Pizza may have fewer locations, but each one stands stronger than before, built on purpose, passion, and the original fire that started it all. Luca now runs the day-to-day, leading a new generation with the same loyalty and love that once saved the shop. As for Antonio, he still visits from time to time, dressed in his old hoodie and cap, blending in quietly among the customers, simply watching the ovens with a quiet smile. When the cashier asks for his name, he always answers the same way: Tony Bellini, a small reminder of the fight it took to bring the truth back to the dough. For Antonio, it was never about revenge. It was about restoring what mattered and knowing when to pass the torch to someone who understood the weight of it. The Marcelli name didn't just survive, it was reborn.